So my name is Bill Malik. I'm Vice President for Infrastructure Strategies with Trend Micro, and my topic is digital transformation for government. We digitized the supply chain. We began with bill of materials processing, using computers to keep track of stuff. We began using database bill of materials, so you could ask more than one type of question. We extended the capability to enterprise resource planning, and then we broke down boundaries crossing businesses with supply chain management. Now we're verging on Industry 4.0, which takes us beyond supply chain management, specifically with the introduction of 5G and edge computing. This is going to give us the ability to visualize processes globally. This is traditional digitization. To go into more detail, once upon a time, we used computers for money. It's simple. Money is one-dimensional. In the 1970s, we started using it to handle stuff. Stuff is more complex than money. Stuff ages. Stuff has expiration dates. And then in the 90s, we began using computers to manage people, identity management. The problem is that people are multidimensional. We change skills, we change careers, we change names, we change addresses, we change focuses of interest, we change careers. This makes identity management a much more complex problem, and understanding this problem is crucial to being able to create this thing I'm calling the identity workspace. Here's what a real digital platform does. This is a farmer, and he's looking out at his fields, and he's also looking at a display that shows a number of pieces of information. It's going to tell him about the crop health, the need for fertilizer, the need and availability of water, the time until harvest, and maybe optimum harvest strategies based on selling points. The important point is the digital platform, that screen, is not in itself the whole solution. That screen is an aggregation of information from different sources. There may be information about water from the local municipal water authority. There will be information about plant health and the need for fertilizers, perhaps from a manufacturer of such things, of pesticides and fertilizers. The information about the market conditions may come from a stock service or a trading service to define what's being done. So this farmer has a near real-time, let me emphasize, near real-time view, real-time enough to be able to make the best possible decisions. Another example of a true successful digital platform, we're seeing here an individual performing maintenance on a piece of machinery. Now, he's using VR augmented reality. So he's looking at the machine, but he's seeing their instructions on how it goes provided by the manufacturer of the machine. He may also see approved vendor lists to buy replacement parts, lubricants, etc. He may also see links to training if he's not quite sure which wire goes where. He's also going to have information about the problems he faces, the decisions he makes, and the information sources he depends on fed to his supervisor so that they can discuss ways to improve the process, improve performance, and optimize the use of that machine in the corporate physical infrastructure. May also include links to what other steps in the process do. So this worker is fortified with an enormous amount of, again, near real-time information to be able to perform the right kind of maintenance at the right time and perhaps, stop problems before they occur. This is a true digital platform. But if we really want to understand digital platforms and why we're talking about the identity workspace, we have to go beyond the tasks an individual faces, perhaps supplemented by guidance from a peer or a manager, and talk about the real, truly successful digital platforms. And by that, I mean multiplayer games. The quality of the graphics and of the music in these products is staggering. Leading edge. It was gaming chips, after all, that enabled vector processing used for artificial intelligence. Very, very high level of innovation and invention to create these platforms. And because of the rich and engrossing nature of that environment, the people who are playing these games interact with each other highly effectively. My daughter and her husband are very involved in many gaming platforms, some of which are the traditional, how fast can you go on this racetrack? Um, how quickly can you and a group of colleagues slay the monster? But there are a multitude of games far beyond anything you've seen there. One that I've recently become somewhat enamored of is called Gris, Spanish for gray. The point of the game is to help a young woman recover her ability to sing. And as you successfully meet the conundrums, the puzzles that the game throws up to you, you're able to create color in the background. You're able to enrich the musical soundtrack. And finally, you reassemble elements of the infrastructure, and this young woman is able to sing again, and flowers come into bloom. It's a wonderful healing metaphor. And I have heard of this and similar games being used to help people who have been struggling with PTSD. So there's much more here than just, hunt the wumpus. We've got a rich platform, engrossing platform that really can bring people together and focus them on task. And that's what we're going to exploit with the identity workspace. Why is this happening? Well, we have sufficient bandwidth. We have near real-time data. And the reason I keep saying that is that it's a subtle pitch for edge computing, being able to defeat latency by having stuff nearer to you in terms of time, having near current data with minimal delay. The zero trust architecture, first of all, I have to say it's a terrible name because obviously it's not zero trust. If you were in a room with zero trust, you couldn't ask anybody for help or directions. What it means is minimize the assumption of trust. One's presence on a network does not, by its very fact, mean that you have rights to everything the network touches. Key points of zero trust architecture, for those of you familiar with network access control or the Jericho Foundation, will understand where this came from in the 90s and 2000s. That's the opportunity. But what drives this are the constraints we face working from home. The fact that managers cannot manage by wandering around. Once upon a time, individuals who worked from home were making a conscious trade-off to, escape from the drama of the office. But the trade-off was their activities weren't seen, their contribution was not perhaps noticed as effectively. They didn't participate in the water cooler gossip. They didn't hear much of the scuttlebutt. And so you consciously traded off the opportunity perhaps for raise or promotion in exchange for a more peaceful environment. But now that everybody's out, managers have to adopt a new style. They have to figure out a new way to determine who's doing a good job. We all have to take advantage of a broader corporate infrastructure in order to make better use of the capabilities of our non-at-home workers. And let me speak a bit about the productivity renaissance, because that's the key to this whole thing. Because we have to now measure our productivity effectively, because we have to pick the right metrics, the ones that can be sampled, as through the example of the fellow doing maintenance, we now have the ability to correctly and thoroughly document the real processes, the necessary inputs and resources, and the absolutely critical outputs that each individual is involved with in the course of their task. And once you've got a decent process description like that, that links all of the tasks together, you can now do some house cleaning. You can now do some pruning. You can get rid of redundant, unnecessary, or duplicative effort and instead focus on exactly what needs to be done. You can eliminate dead time simply by looking at the map of the overall set of processes. And that's where the productivity renaissance lies. So let's talk about the identity workspace. Being stuck at home has revealed the problems with sustaining corporate culture, the unwritten assumptions about networking within the, I'm not talking about computer networking. I mean, finding somebody who knows something. That is now a somewhat more complex process. The informal communications have been flattened, and the dependencies of the office workforce are now highlighted. And that means that we have to be clear about what we want. We have to be explicit in our discussion of what we expect. And that means we can put appropriate measures in place to effectively manage what's going on. So, what do we need from managers? Managers have to figure out what stresses workers face. They have to figure out what the problems are associating with other managers who they may not have seen face to face for a year. We have to reconsider what organizational behavior elements we want to stress. We've got to make sure that people stay connected. And the way to do that is to put together a platform that's not just Zoom or Teams or GoToMeeting. It's something more, something engaging, something that allows us to explore and create, not just perform a rote task. What are our dependencies on technology? Clearly, need more out of the network. We need to cope with a much wider enterprise attack surface. Every one of us working at home is augmenting the set of vulnerabilities that our business faces. My home is, I'm not particularly a technophile, but my home has a tremendous amount of technology in it, and that stuff is itself vulnerable. And that network is the same network I'm talking to you on, assuming that Optimum continues to perform. And so there's a vulnerability, there's a risk. I don't use a VPN when I get into the office because each of the key applications provides its own encryption. And the notion of me sitting here at this device in my home office with a wide open, unmanaged tunnel to core office functions is a bad idea, to use the phrase from the high-tech world of information security. We have to figure out how to build and sustain teams, how to attract good people, and we have to figure out how to stay in touch. So what do? We understand the vulnerabilities. We put programs in place. We defend ourselves in depth against those threats. We build teams by making sure we're hiring for values. And this chart on the right is something I learned from a couple of years at a startup that I was at a while ago. And that is, performance comes down to, in this analysis, two key dimensions. The first is the person generating results or not? That's the vertical axis. And the horizontal axis is, are they living the values? An individual who's doing neither is in the lower left-hand corner, and they're not helping. Now you see, I was at Gartner for 11 years, and so Magic Quadrants are kind of, my bread and butter. A person, on the other hand, who's living the values but just not putting up the numbers, that's a real headache for a manager. How do you inspire somebody? How do you guide them? How do you create the desire to learn? How do you help train? How do you give them the materials and hope they follow? Because you want to get them going. Now, the biggest problem is the top left, though. That's the individual who's hitting the numbers, but they're causing a lot of problems. They're an EEO lawsuit waiting to happen. That's where you're going to see a lot of broken glass. And those individuals are a cancer on the organization. You have to be able to figure out that they're dangerous and not helping and undercutting the values, and they have to be shown somewhere else to be productive. Somebody who's doing both definitely want to be a keeper for those. So what do? Boost the infrastructure. Take advantage of this once in a lifetime opportunity, and I mean that sincerely, to use the pandemic as a platform on which to build the digital platform to transform your enterprise. This doesn't come around that often. Use your identity management capabilities, make them more comprehensive so you can build and sustain that identity workspace, the place where people go to feel that they are part of something important, the important thing being the mission of your organization, and create that digital platform to enrich society.